I'm going to cover 10 transportation words or phrases to avoid, or some of these actually fit in the category of just using them deliberately and making sure that we use a term in the way that it's intended and make sure that we fully explain it to our audience. For number 10, we have an aviation term, the word tarmac. And this is commonly used, particularly within media, to describe some location on an airport. But tarmac is actually a paving material, not a location. So when we need to describe a location on an airport, we should use that correct terminology, whether it's the runway, the taxiway, the apron, the terminal. There are specific locations, and those do have proper names to them. So we should use those instead of referring to any place on an airport as tarmac. Number 9, we have jargon and acronyms. And this is really meant for when we're talking to a non-technical audience. So depending on our audience, we need to be cognizant about terms that they will understand to help them try to gain some understanding of what you're trying to convey to them. So we want to try to leave this out when we're using and when we're talking to a non-technical audience. Know your audience, limit your use of jargon, and provide simple definitions for this non-technical audience. At number 8, we have terms that often get used interchangeably: highway, street, road. These can mean very different things. And so when we're presenting information about a road, a street, a highway, we should make sure we define that term that we're going to use and then use those terms consistently to our audience so that they have a good understanding of what we're talking about, what the roads or streets or highways purpose is, how it will be used, what are some of those design characteristics. Is it 2-lane, 4-lane, 6-lane, etc.? Define those characteristics so that the audience knows what we are talking about. At number 7, we have speed. And there are differences between design speed, posted speed, operating speeds, and there's actually other definitions of speed within transportation engineering and traffic engineering specifically. So for example, in this image, we see a posted speed of 20 miles per hour. This vehicle is currently operating at 22 miles per hour. And then the design speed of this roadway differs from both of those. Likely, it has a design speed of perhaps 25 miles per hour that mostly is going to be related to some of the horizontal and vertical alignment of this roadway. At number 6, we have number of lanes. And this is really just about being careful with this number, being or with this term, being very deliberate with this term. Lanes are often reported as the total for the road, not per direction. So in this image, this is a 4-lane highway. It's a 4-lane divided highway, if we want to get more specific, with a median. So if we're talking about this, we're typically going to say there's 4 lanes or 2 lanes per direction. So if we want to say something about 2 lanes, we need to make sure that we say it's per directions, because overall, most of our profession will refer to this as a 4-lane roadway or a 4-lane divided highway. At number 5, we have alternative modes. And this is a term that is generally used to capture a lot of things that are non-personal automobile. And I think we just need to be very careful about how we use this term. I heard from a colleague that they get annoyed about the term accommodating when it comes to using any mode other than automobiles, and that surely we can do better than sort of tolerating the other modes. So thinking about how we describe and how we relate information about other modes of transportation. So if we want to be specific, we can talk about pedestrians and bicyclists, and we can talk about transit and any other mode of travel that may be used and may be important in the study that you might be working on. At number 4, we have the term roundabout. And we just need to be careful when we use and deliberate about using the term roundabout. A lot of times, anyone who sees some shape that is round or roundish, they refer to it as a roundabout. But we should use the appropriate term if it is something other than a roundabout. So this is an example of a modern roundabout, so we should use the term roundabout to describe that. But we may also encounter other designs that are not what we consider a modern roundabout. And so we should call these a rotary or a traffic circle. And it does depend on the traffic control devices as well as the size. So the larger you get, you stop fitting into the category roundabout. You're more in that traffic circle or rotary type design. And also the traffic control device. So whether it's stop controlled or yield control on the entry makes a big difference in how we are going to term a roundabout versus some of these other round or roundish type of designs. At number 3, we have synchronized signals. So a lot of times this term comes up when people are trying to talk about a coordinated signal system. So that's the term we should use. When something is synchronized, it means that it's happening at the same time. And so we typically don't want a series of closely spaced traffic signals to occur at the same time. We want to develop a green wave or progress the traffic. So we want to actually coordinate those signals, not synchronize the signal. So a slight distinction there in the terms synchronization and coordination. At number 2, we have 2 terms that refer to the same thing, stoplight and red light. We want to avoid these terms, although it is very common to hear this from the public. Instead, we should be using the term traffic signal when we're referring to either of these. In this image, we do have the red clearance interval shown. So we do see red indication on all these signal heads. This is not what we want to see for all of our phases, though. We are going to see the signal change into green indication, amber indication, back to red indication, and back through this red clearance interval. We do want to see that changing of the phases. So we're going to see all those indications and give the priority to different movements. So don't use the term stoplight, don't use the term red light. We should be calling this a traffic signal. And at number 1 on our list, we have the term accident. And instead of accident, we should be using the term crash or collision or some other term that is similar. Accident implies that there's nothing we could do to have prevented that crash. And so generally, it's just not a term we should be using in our industry. Generally, we're referring to crashes or collisions. And often when we're using data about crashes or collisions, usually we're actually talking about reported crashes or collisions, because it can occur that there are crashes that don't actually get reported to local law enforcement that then gets reported into a crash database or crash analysis system. So we need to think about, first and foremost, don't use the word accident, use crash or collision. And then more specifically, we probably should usually be talking about reported crashes or reported collisions. This is my top 10 list of terms that we should be familiar with, at least being very deliberate about how we use these terms. If I've missed one, please let me know, or please let me know what your number 1 kind of pet peeve of a term being used is.